Welcome to another Baby Theater in the Dark. Tonight's story will take us back to the time of the 1500s. You see, I don't know too much about the 1500s, but I do know that Ezekiel the prophet lived in that time frame. Now, one thing about Ezekiel is he was something of an average person, but he just seemed to have many dreams that seemed to foretell the future. He would go to sleep one night, and he would wake up, and he wouldn't remember a thing. But he would remember that he could remember his dreams at some point in time. Now, to be more clear, he would dream of the future and then forget it. So he wouldn't be able to tell you directly what the future would foretell. But when the moment came in his life where the dream spawned upon his head and he looked forward and could see that the moment that he dreamt was happening right at that moment, then he could tell you, oh, I saw this in a dream. And he would be correct. Now, there's a few questions that I have. The first question is, how does he dream of the future when it hasn't happened yet? Now, there's many theories on this. But one such theory is that everything has already happened and we're reliving it over and over again. Now, in this theory, we are living the same life in most cases, but I have another theory for you, and one that's closer to the truth. That each person lives their life a certain way, and then moves on to the next low in the chain, and then they live that life. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've lived this life before. It just means that you've unlocked a certain portion of that chaotic future. Now, the other thing to think about is when the sort of called deja vu happens, what actually occurs. One thing to think about is, if you've ever had deja vu and in your mind it's playing a reel of what had happened and what you thought you'd seen in a dream. But as you're speaking, you begin to say something random and that part was not in the dream. Now, in this case, the reel plays in your head, but the deja vu, it doesn't match up anymore. So therefore, you remember the things you were thinking in that dream, but those aren't the same things as you were speaking at the same time. Well, that's just to fill you in a little bit about deja vu itself, but one thing to think about is, if you decide at any point in time to switch paths, for example, simply not driving to work and going to a different state and suddenly picking up another life, something that doesn't make any sense, that might alter your entire reality. Or it may be exactly what we were supposed to do. That is the trick. That is the trick. There is no way to know your fate. There is only living it. Something to comfort, though. Every choice that you make can be made free, however you will. And that is something beautiful. Now, back to Ezekiel. Well, Ezekiel did have a dream. And in it, a temple was ahead of him. Now, he walked into this temple and peered up into the ceiling. And there was a large bat there, hovering, almost as if it knew that he was watching. And suddenly it descended upon him. Now, the interesting part about this is it only descended upon him when he peered up at it. But there came a time when Ezekiel was walking down the street and he saw a little shop and he entered in and he bought some candies. And he nodded and said, thank you. And these candies tasted bland by our standards. I mean, we live in a world that really gives in to the pleasures of candies. This world really did not, so it was good. It was okay, but not up to our standards, I would say. Now, he was quite impressed, quite happy about it. But what he didn't understand was that this candy purchase was meant to happen the entirety of his life. This simple purchase of a treat was always meant to happen. But what came next seemed as if a strange fate. Something that seems to have broken time continuum. Now, there is no such thing as time continuum typically, because everything is not linear. It's pointed. It's a dot. Everything is simply a dot. A life is a life, and there's no chronological order. Now, when thinking of this, however, when keeping this in mind, as he traveled down the street, and he saw the temple ahead, he simply remembered the deja vu. At the last moment he was about to open the door, he remembered the giant bat that descended upon him. And instead of opening the door, he just simply walked away. Now, some would say that if he didn't look up, perhaps the giant bat wouldn't have stalked him. But it is to say that the giant bat seemed like it visualized him being destroyed. And, well, Ezekiel didn't want that to happen, so as he walked away, he realized that he really had no idea what to do anymore. He couldn't remember what he was going to take in his next step. Well, what had happened was, on that day, Ezekiel was meant to die. To a giant bat at that. But it seemed he'd gotten another lease on life. However, the Catwall had never recorded further than this event. So any opinions, any thoughts in his head, any mind, conscious effort were gone. He was simply, inevitably free. Now, some would say that this would disrupt some kind of time continuum and corrupt the world and all that, but the truth is, things just continued. Just as I had Ezekiel went through his life changing people's lives and changing things about the world, and he eventually invented a simple item that would take a body and maneuver it into space, almost as if it were a teleporter. Yet it would assemble bits and pieces of cells onto a totally different plane of existence, and, well, they would arrive there. Now, this was an incredible feat, and something that most had no idea how it would work, but he did, and it was pretty nice. And this really sparked a creative, an amazing aspect of the world that hadn't been seen before. Of course, that was his dimension. He has many dimensions, but that was his best one. And that's how this all works, is there are all different realms with all different dimensions, and simply something that happens. One small change can trigger emotions that would never come into play, and things that would never happen. It's one small change. So think about that for your life, is one small change can make that big of a difference. Then make that change. Or don't make that change. Whichever path you go, it could have a 50-50 shot at being that change that you never meant to make, never were supposed to make. I digress. Ezekiel did die penniless, and the teleporter truly changed the world. But in this world, there's still plenty of time to make those changes that we talk about. So, flash forward to today, 2022. Ezekiel, well, he just resurrected. And the interesting part is, no one's ever heard of the teleporter or the technology that made it. No one's ever lived life to the fullest in his mind. Yet the same Cottonmall that invented that rebirthed into this new body. However, Ezekiel, well, he was a baby. He couldn't think clearly, and definitely couldn't maneuver himself to perform complex actions, and, well, to be honest, he was hungry. So hungry. Every day hungry. So much so that it overtook his mind. was still Ezekiel, same as always. However, it wasn't. That's the trick of the Whoa, it's simply a recorded version of Ezekiel helping a newly birthed baby. But the tools that baby needed were right in Ezekiel's hands. The materials to create such a device are simply ready to be made. When that child grows up, if that child truly utilizes their gifts and truly makes their forces known, well, they can reinvent the same technology. The same technology that Ezekiel had made. All that they need to do is listen to the whispers of Ezekiel. Yet, there are many times where no one will listen. Or they know that they have the gift, but this world betrays them and forces them into wasting their life on meaningless things. So, ensure that you listen to yourself. Ensure that you're taking the time. Because one day, maybe you will, the teleporter will transport us to the stars.